With printers from the likes of AnkerMake, both the M5 and M5C now, there's almost a new subcategory of FDM printers that most people don't even realise. And chances are this isn't the right printer for you, despite it being one of the best 3D printers I've ever used. But if you're like me and you want the same things I want from a 3D printer, you'll love this too. So hi, I'm Ross and this is FoHammer Videos. So I was actually surprised by the negative response I had to my AnkerMake M5 video. I love that printer and it was still the best FDM printer I've ever had my hands on. Despite me having faster printers, larger printers, and arguably more stable or more accurate printers, the only one that is still on my desk and that is actually used is my AnkerMake M5. And this is where we have what is arguably a fair separation in the FDM 3D printing community. And if this printer isn't the right choice for you, that's okay, you don't need to hate on it in the comments. But I expect for many of you, this is exactly what you've been looking for, and like me, you're gonna love it. So the AnkerMake M5C is a compact version of the M5, hence the C. But at 220x220 by 250mm, you're losing 15cm on both the X and the Y axes when compared to the original M5, but the height has remained the same, along with almost every other technical specification of this printer. The main thing that's missing, which has operational value, is the camera, which had a bunch of AI features like failure detection and the ability to create a time-lapse of every single print. But there is one very obvious big change, which is a pretty smart move from AnkerMake. After all, the whole point of this package is to take the popular AnkerMake M5 printer and reduce costs to make it more affordable and more accessible to more people, which is why AnkerMake have completely removed the on-printer UI. In fact, the only controls on this printer are restricted to the power switch, which I'll let you figure out what that does for yourself, and one giant play/pause button that I never found any need for and never actually used. So before I go into how the printer works, let's go back to talking about what AnkerMake printers are and who they're for. FDM 3D printing from just a few years ago was an absolute chore. In fact, it was a nightmare, and we've come a long way. And despite the technology evolving rapidly, it's felt like a much slower journey for those people who have been in this hobby for these years, tinkering with printers to the nth degree to get the best out of them, or in some cases, just to make them work at all. And even for the vast majority of 3D printing adopters nowadays, you are still thrown in at the deep end of a very large pool whilst people shout conflicting tips about how to swim from the sidelines. You'll find that most slicer apps you use have a similar UI to Microsoft Word 97, with a myriad of options you don't understand and tooltips that are only useful if you already knew the context. And meanwhile, you're sat there with a new printer, some random filament, and no idea where to even start in order to make the object that you want. And 99% of the 3D printing community now have gone through that rite of passage by learning the basic settings to change, or even which ones are the basic settings, learning the filament types, the importance of filament age and humidity it's been sat in, environment temperature and things like that. Some people go to that length to dial in their printer further with things like extrusion settings, and this is to ensure the correct volume of material is moved by the extruder within a 3% margin. It's a chore and it turns more people off from 3D printing faster than they decided to get started. Which is why I was trying to convey that AnkerMake's approach is a breath of fresh air to anybody who's new to this hobby. They take as much of that away from you as is actually possible. And for the extra effort they put in, yeah, they typically charge more than a similar spec printer, but they do add some visual enhancements to their printers too. Style-wise, AnkerMake printers are more comparable to modern 2D printers than some jerry-rigged scaffolding that most FDM printers look like. It's all about that premium package and ease of use. And of course, if you already understand how an FDM printer operates, why would you spend the extra? Well, it depends if you want the benefit and ease of use that you get from this. From the get-go, the AnkerMake M5C is simple. Assembly is no more than connect the gantry to the base, put in 8 screws, plug in 2 cables, and put the cover over it to keep everything tidy. There's an upright arm to connect as your filament mount, but you can or may have a separate filament holder or dryer box you can use instead. And once it's all swiftly set up and turned on, everything else is done in the app. And before any of you turn your nose up to this isn't your typical printer companion app, which is typically another example of poorly thought out messes with no UX development considered. This is a neat and tidy application with all the functions and options where you would intuitively expect them to be. You easily connect your printer to a phone using no more than the QR code on the printer, and once you create an AnkerMake account, this will then connect the printer to that account and to your local Wi-Fi. All of the controls that were on the screen of the M5 are now in the phone app, and you'll still have full access to all of the functions. So this is kind of like the original Google Chromecast approach. You don't need much in the way of external controls when you already have a device in your hand with a screen that can do it already. All of the functions like bed leveling, moving the plate or the Z-arm are all done in here. Preheating is done here, and there's a selection of prints you can run from here too. But for proper prints, the real work is done in the desktop app, the AnkerMake Slicer, which is essentially a re-engineered version of Cura. But once again, unlike other OEM branded versions of this application where the style's been changed, this version has been refined to show you only what you need in order to get the printer working. As soon as you log in, you'll find your printer is already there along with its settings since you added this to your account in the phone app. From here, it's just a simple case of drag a model into the view window, and your settings at the outset are as simple as choosing the material, the speed, the layer height for quality, the infill for support, and whether you'll need to support it or not. Then just click Slice, Print, choose your printer and wait for it to start. It's all done remotely. And if this is your first print, it will perform a full auto bed level, which will take about 10 minutes, but then it'll just carry on with your print. And so long as you're using decent quality filament, that's as much as there is to it to getting started 3D printing whatever models you want. Now the good news is, if you do want to delve in further and refine your printer for better quality, accuracy, or the intricacies of just different filament types like silk PLA, you can. Just switch from easy to expert mode and you've got full access to the whole range of Cura settings. And for me, someone who's still an intermediate beginner with FDM printing, this ease of use along with the tidy workflow is something I much prefer over every other printer. Now with the M5C, I do miss that onboard screen giving me a clear countdown of how long I've got left on a print, and I miss the AI camera too. And I also, I kind of miss the extra 15cm on the X and Y build volume. But this new printer has some benefits too. The bed belt has now been raised out of the base of the unit where it was recessed on the M5, and I'm not the only person who noticed that it was a pain to get bits of loose filament out of that mechanism. And at least for me, I've found prints out of the box are far more accurate too. I spent ages trying to dial in my retraction settings in order to print a collapsible sword on the M5, and I never managed it. The print would just consistently fail because the seams would fuse. But on this printer, using the exact same filament I used before and no changes to the default profile, it printed and it was usable on the first try, so there's probably been some tweak to the hot end too that I'd like to see replicated on the original M5. But honestly, the main difference on this printer to all others is user experience. And a few people saw my last video and believed I was just saying that the M5 was worth a premium price just because it's got a big clock on the screen, but that's my bad for not explaining myself right. It really isn't just because it's got a big clock, it's that clock, like every single other part of the UI, has been carefully thought out to be in the exact right place you'd want it at the exact right time. And that's just one part of a multi-tiered and multi-layered experience that results in saving me so much time in having to even think. It's the persistent and smaller barrier to entry difference that consistently makes me reach for my M5 first whenever I want to print something. But if there's anything I'd like to see change, it's a tiny thing, but I'd like AnkerMake to offer an ultra low layer height preset in their options, whatever the minimum step distance is, just for those very few of us who are desperate for that ultra fine level of quality. Other printers have offered as low as 0.06mm, and I doubt it would be hard for AnkerMake to actually implement this in their minimum step distance for both printers too. But other than that, honestly, if you're after a printer that is easier to get to grips with than anything else, just so you can make cool stuff, maybe as decorations for your kids or toys to play with, this is the only place I would truly recommend that you start. I'd like to say thanks for watching, and a huge thanks goes out to our channel members who you can see on the screen now. Please consider joining them for early access to our videos, exclusive content and priority responses to your comments. Hell, I'll even be your personal shopper for the right price. But in all honesty, I just hope you enjoyed this and got some benefit from it. So until next time, good night and party on. Fohammer out.